Hey there. It's Rob here. Here, let me turn this off. Just give me a sec. I'll keep us from echoing. I have a really tough topic to talk about, and I don't know how to get into this. I did invite a bunch of you here to come in and have a discussion about this, so we can like talk it out as usual, like we do in the community. But let me just tell you this story. Which is something I really love to do here. This is going to be a short video. It's probably going to be about an hour long, but I want to go through all the reasons for my justification of this decision before we get into it. And the TLDR is I'm going to primarily put everything on GitHub from now on. And those of you who know me know that that's a big change. You also know that I'm not afraid of making changes when new information comes around or when the situation changes in technology. And frankly, in the arena of technology, there's quite a bit of battling between, high-end services such as operating systems and things like source hosting services, one of the most important services in the world right now. And so there's some pretty intense debate going on between, not debate, but decision making going on about what service to use going forward. So I'll tell you a couple of stories before I get into I have the bullet points we're going to go over. So the first story is that at the beginning of the year, I could tell that GitHub was kind of catching up, and with GitLab, and GitLab had really put the pressure on it. I think 2013, 2014, when it was it might have been 2015 even, when they came out, and then and GitHub was in the toilet. They were about to go bankrupt. They were wrought with scandal, and Microsoft came in and swooped in and saved them. Bought them for was it 7.6 or 7.8 billion or something. One of the smartest decisions Microsoft has ever made, by the way, and one of the greatest indicators that Microsoft is not the same as it used to be, which we'll get into. And at that time, it became really obvious that the race was on to see who had made the best decision about where the industry was going and what people wanted. And suffice it to say that as of today, December 23rd, 2020, GitHub is just dominating. I mean, really dominating. And I'm going to go into the statistics behind why I believe that's true. It's just undeniable. It's a very objective conclusion at this point that unless GitLab does something rather dramatic, they came out with their IPO last year or so. I can't remember the exact date, but unless GitLab does something really dramatic, and just pains my heart to say this because I love GitLab, you guys know I do. It's not going to be around. I mean, if it's around, it'll be an afterthought for something for people to use who really want to focus on an open source offering and make a bunch of contributions. But for a lot of very objective, real reasons that frankly make me sad, GitHub is on a trajectory to destroy GitLab in the long term. And that is enough for me to make the conclusion that I do not want to further build dependencies on my package level code that gets listed in people's code as import statements and stuff on anything but GitHub. But even more so, I enjoy the experience I had recently comparing GitHub to GitLab, and I gave GitHub a good shot this week. I will do another video on how you can simultaneously publish to both GitLab and GitHub without setting up any complicated mirroring on GitLab, which is, it's relatively easy, but it's just annoying. And so just adding an extra origin, some of you out there will be like, well, duh, but just adding a secondary origin so that anytime you push goes to both repos at the same time is a very useful technique. I won't be getting into that today. Please stay tuned. I'll do another video on that. It's like one line. It's not that hard. Another great thing about that is that does address the need, if you wanted to even synchronize to a backup Git repo in your house. So say you have a server in your world. It's not really super fast. It's on your wide area network. I mean, your local area network, and you could add a third. You could add a third Git repo, repository host service, so that you have, in addition to the local copy, you would have multiple backups of your source code, and that would also allow you to, manage all of that private stuff that you might not necessarily want to host on GitHub or GitLab at all, and just want to have a backup copy of it to make sure you don't lose it. So all of this thought and all of this pondering and reflection has come about because I've been considering cleaning up all of this stuff. I got hundreds and hundreds of repos to go through, and there's been a lot of really serious decisions I've had to make about what my future is going to look like. I usually do this about the beginning of every year. You can see videos of me talking about this very thing last year, and I'm still making a debate about whether I should even pull that video completely down all the way, because based on the stuff at that time, I think that was a fair decision. But at the end of 2020, no, the writing's on the wall. I think there's a lot of objective evidence that GitHub is the place to be and will be for the foreseeable future. And something pretty radical happens on the part of GitLab. All right, so let's get into it. I'm actually going to go ahead and present my case without any chat distracting me, and then I'm going to open up the chat. Hopefully everybody will have trickled in during that time. I imagine you guys are already going at it in there. I don't have any visibility to the chat right now so that I can focus on these points that I want to make clearly, and then when we get to that point where we can really open it up and debate on stream, I'll put that on full screen and we can have a conversation at the end. That way, if you just want to hear my case, you can fast forward through that. And if you want to hear what everybody has to say, you can just know that that's going to come at the end. Kind of like a live comment section, if you will. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull back up. This is on RWX. Let me show you. Actually, if you want to just pull it up in a graphic web browser. Here you go. So, oops, I covered my head up. That was weird. How did I do that? Don't you love live video? There we go. So there we go. It's rwx.gg/advice/use GitHub. There is still an old one. If you might find it, I think it's services I don't have the search enabled on this yet. Services GitHub or GitLab /isbest. I'm leaving this up for a while because in 2021 I no longer believe that GitLab is best. GitHub has blown them away, and this is a link back to here. So if you want to follow along on these points that I'm going to go on to, you can do that by pulling that up in the web browser. This is going to direct my conversation tonight. As you can see, it's quite a bit of thought and has gone into this, and I don't want to just give you my conclusion and run away. I really want to tell you exactly why I think this. Because I think that there's a number of people who actually watch my stream who, qualify as CTOs, and they're in the higher end decision making process, and these are the kind of people who really want, hard facts about their decisions, and I try to put as many together of these facts as I could, rather than just keeping it be kind of this feeling that I have. Which is also a thing, right? So let's go back to the thing here. So it says here, 2020 has been an amazing year for GitHub. People have really wondered what would become of GitHub, even with all the controversy over Microsoft when it bought it some years back. You guys might remember this. There was a lot of controversy about what Microsoft was going to do with GitHub. Was it going to, obliterate it? Was it going to do, embrace, extend, extinguish like it's done with things in the past? But is it just doing it because it wants to control VS Code more? Is it doing it because it wants to control all the source code in the world? Does it want to get into the Linux game? We can debate about why Microsoft did what it did, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it was a brilliant decision on their part at this point. And I'm going to go so far as to say that it was one of the major at this point. I mean, they've had 2 or 3 years now to demonstrate their goodwill towards the Linux community, and joining the Linux Foundation, and putting Chromium into Edge. I mean, Sanjay's Microsoft is not your dad's evil Microsoft, so to speak. They are totally driven by a different ethos. The entire company is. I'm not saying they're not out for profit, and they've done a lot of things that are still very, sketchy. But among the, huge companies, I think Microsoft. I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but I think Microsoft is one of the better ones in terms of the ethics score these days. Now they've done horrible things, and recently they flexed their power, and they just decided to effectively blue screen a bunch of machines in order to take on this virus, and they did draconian measures by saying that we own the operating system, we're letting you use your computer, so you should be grateful. And so I'm not suggesting for a second that there's not some part of them that's very evil, but compared to Apple, they're just a lot better. It's basically like which flavor of evil do you want, right? Do you want the evil that's promoting developers and that's contributing to open source and that's contributing to the Linux projects and giving back and promoting cloud in their way by having Linux in the cloud, or do you want one that wants absolute total 100% lock into their ecosystem? And in that sense, I think Microsoft is less evil than Apple, let's say. And I just probably the chat I imagine right now is just buzzing with controversy over that statement. But like it or not, Microsoft owns GitHub, and has shown that they so far are doing things that are in the developers' interests. I imagine in the hopes of getting them to come in, and their adoption of Linux is one thing that has really got me thinking. So anyway, let's go through this. What does that have to do with all of GitHub, GitLab, and GitLab and GitHub? And I'm going to argue that Microsoft's purchase is actually indirectly probably one of the single biggest factors in why you should stay on GitHub and not GitLab. And if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said going to GitLab as an independent organization, that Sanjay, I forget his name, the CEO. I have a tweet where I said, well, what is the goal here? You guys should really have, Google. You should partner with Google Cloud Platform or something. Back when I was, more hopeful about Google, and he said in the tweet, the response to my tweet, he said, no, we're going to go completely independent. And I really respect that about GitLab. I respect that GitLab is a sort of a the underdog here, and is trying to do the right thing. In many ways, they are really trying to do the right thing. They have 100% transparency in their business practices, which we're going to get into, as I think is actually hurting them. They have this open source model where they actually have lots of contributions from open source people, which is also hurting them because they're dependent on those contributions. They don't progress. They have this 100% worldwide model. They didn't want to be locked down to Silicon Valley or to one specific area, which I really, really love. And they've been very successful. They've had Harvard Business Review studies of them because of it. They've been a really, really successful unicorn company, Forbes calls them, because of all of this. And yet I still feel like there's enough evidence to suggest that they may be possibly suffering from not being connected with, as well as GitHub is, with all the many companies in Silicon Valley. And that I think it's fair to say that they're not. I don't have any specific evidence of that, but it really feels like that GitHub is has far closer business integration in terms of the culture and the communication and the networking and all of that with the other Silicon Valley companies than GitLab. So GitLab's kind of an outlier in that sense. They've kind of thumbed their nose at the Silicon Valley culture to some degree, and I love that. Absolutely love that. That's why I want to work there. But at the same time, I think it's actually hurt them in terms of being able to deliver on whatever their goals are, and that's kind of up in the air too right now. We're going to talk about how GitLab and GitHub's goals seem to be very different. And you'd think they would be the same because they're both providing source, but they're not. And I want to talk about that as well. So Microsoft backed. Microsoft, since the beginning of time, whether or not they really do well on it and they execute on it, they have been championing developers forever. They are 100% about developers. They know they'll live and die by getting developers to develop on their platform. And I don't particularly like the Microsoft ecosystem, never have. But the fact of the matter is, they cater to developers, and you see them doing this now. You see the developers, saying, "Hey, we want Linux. We want a command line so we can do microservices development, and we can, we want to deploy to Azure on Linux. We don't want your whatever you're going to give us. That's what developers want." And Sanjay's been responding to that as a CEO. And I think they're doing the right thing there. And it's just so weird to hear those words come out of my mouth. It knows the really important thing about Microsoft is that it's been around on the block, and its CEO has been around the block, and they are, sort of possessive and proprietary for sure, but that also makes them more competitive, like a lot more competitive. And so you get a kind of this kumbaya feeling in GitLab, but you just don't get the competitive spirit from GitLab. And I'm so sorry to have to say that, GitLab. I feel like your focus on saving the world and all the things that I really truly believe in personally is actually hurting you right now, because you're doing some things that are kind of you're giving your core product away for free, and you're competing against people that aren't doing that and yet are still making enough contributions to the open source community to placate them and to attract them and to have them want to be there. So and that's the thing. Microsoft knows when to share and when to charge, and when to control things. The practice of controlling the operating system and doing whatever you want is not something I get the sense that GitLab would ever do. GitLab is still a corporation, but it's just so against just everything that I sense from them when I watch their conferences and I listen to them and I interact with their people on Twitter. They're just so against those kinds of practices, and they're so kind of liberal in their approach to business that I think it actually hurts them. I think, in fact, this whole experience has caused me to really rethink how I personally look at the entire open source proposition. I am still, very much a proponent of sharing things, but to what degree do you give your core knowledge and IP away? You're not a bad person for wanting to be, paid and compensated for the time and work and effort you put into the world. You might be a bad person if you're overly greedy about it when you have a monopoly on the thing, but wanting to be paid and be able to eat and participate in society in a way where you're compensated for your time and effort. That's, even if you really feel like you want to make it available to everybody, that's not a bad thing. And I think that some of the open source and especially some of the FSF people go way too far on that particular point. And I believe Torvalds agrees with this. This is one of the reasons he talks about removing the not for profit or you can't make money on it clause from the original GPL license when Linux was released. So anyway, so Microsoft knows when to share and they know when to charge. I don't think GitLab does. And let me keep going there. So, Microsoft, the Microsoft offering, the GitHub offering can't be run from home. You can't run GitHub with, on your own box here. And who cares? I mean, the bottom line is who cares, right? The people that are using GitHub either want you to do all the work for them. They just want a Git repo locally. They can use any number of, Git or other localized services when they want them that are far more performant than GitLab. I tried to set up a GitLab thing. This was 3 years ago, but I tried to set up a GitLab instance here, running Postgres and everything, and it was a pain in the butt. I hated it compared to Git or just a plain old Git repo. I cannot tell you, it was just a horrible experience. And I was like, hell no, because it was so slow. And a lot of people might want to pick up some sort of repo to set up. So yeah, who cares if you can't run it at home? There's a lot of other options out there. And Microsoft knows not to give everything away. They know when to keep something, and we're going to come back to that when we talk about the business angle. This is something. So Microsoft has way more capitalization. They don't have to beg and brag about about the money. They don't have to beg for new venture money and investment, and they don't have to brag about it. You know, the communications from GitLab recently that I've been hearing have been more about, oh, look at how much value our company has. We are a unicorn and we're slated to be one of the best things to come out of the, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then, but I'm not hearing about any actual value that they're adding to their product. They're, you know, it's like smoke and mirrors stock stuff. And that really scares me because that's normally associated with, you know, empty stuff. And the thing of it is that GitLab is never going to be capitalized as well as Microsoft. It's going to take them a long time to get that to anywhere near what Microsoft can provide and backup capital. And so GitHub has this nice cozy hosting and guaranteed funding coming from Microsoft that GitLab does not have. And you think that would make, you know, GitLab really cutthroat and more aggressive in their, you know, going for the funding and stuff and whatever they need to do to get their, you know, their core business person online. And we need to talk about that because I think that GitLab and GitHub are actually targeting two very specific customers, and that's a real big difference. And so anyway, Microsoft is there. They're around. They're not going anywhere. They're especially not going anywhere now, not with their presence in Azure cloud. And now that they got, I believe they're the ones that won the American contract. They ripped it away from Amazon, I'm pretty sure. You know, Microsoft's not going anywhere. If they actually swap out the underlying OS with Linux, they'll completely lock up the market. And their association with NVIDIA, which I've already said, I believe is going to dominate the whole world within 5 years, is, you know, NVIDIA and Microsoft have the best relationship of all the companies out there, if you ask me, just because they've been feeding each other for so long. And, you know, and now that they have ARM, you know, and whatever. So Microsoft's not going away. It's highly capitalized, and that means that, you know, they're going to be there for GitHub, and GitHub is just yet another division. It's a big one, obviously, within Microsoft, and it removes a bunch of the effort that would be wasted within GitHub to try to impress investors or go after this, you know, do all that extra, you know, employ all of those people and spend all that money and resources and time on investment and securing investment and making a big deal about your IPO. All of that effort, not necessary on GitHub. All of that effort instead at GitHub can be applied toward marketing the GitHub product. And we're going to get to this, GitHub's marketing is way better than GitLab. They've destroyed them and we'll keep going on this. Right. So Microsoft doesn't need to brag about its valuation, which is what I'm keep reading. At Microsoft, it might be in Seattle, but it is still enjoying all of the Silicon Valley advantages because it's been around forever and it's got ties everywhere. I mean, the roots and connections between the Microsoft ecosystem and everything else are very, very deep running. And GitLab, if anything, has very light roots. And because GitLab is so spread out all over the world, I think it actually works against them. And this is really hard for me to admit. I'm actually going to tell you, I don't like admitting it. I think that the future of work is remote, but I think that I don't know. Right now, it seems like the absolute emphasis on being remote that GitLab is doing is actually hurting them, even though they keep talking about how awesome it is and they don't lose any employment. They don't lose any efficiency. I don't think that they are taking into account all the lost connections and networking and sort of, you know, tough to quantify the connections that were happening with GitHub for a very long time and have been in Silicon Valley, and not to mention Microsoft. Microsoft's like, you know, ridiculously well connected. And GitLab it's going to take them years, if not a decade, to even get close to having that level of connection with all of the other industries. And I'm going to give you some specific examples of that as we go, but just right off the bat, so like DigitalOcean provides a GitHub integration. Don't see that for GitLab, right? You know, Netlify, thank God, does GitLab and GitHub for integration. We see, you know, when we talk about education, we'll come to this again, but services like Repos are integrating GitHub. In fact, it's more likely to see GitHub having a connection and being integrated than it is to see GitLab being integrated. And that is a serious problem when you're trying to attract, you know, investors or more importantly, you know, developer mind share. And we're going to return to that point. So Microsoft is not hyper transparent, obviously, and you know that's a competitive advantage. You might not like it. I might not like it. I might like the idea of super hyper transparency that GitLab is doing, but it is not a good business practice. I mean, it might be good for the world, but your competitors are going to eat you for lunch. And Microsoft is just like, oh, this is everything they're doing. This is all of their direction. This is every decision. This is all their marketing minutes. I don't have to do any corporate espionage here. I know exactly what my competitor is doing at any moment of the day. In fact, he tweets every 10 seconds about what he's going to be doing. So a company like Microsoft, even the new Microsoft that's less, aggressive, sees that and it's like shaking their head like, you're serious? You're going to give us literally every single one of your corporate strategies? I mean, I refuse to believe that somebody at Microsoft is not like following all of that and going, oh, we're going to beat him to the punch on this or this. And it might be true that they withhold some of their minutes, and the suggestion that GitLab puts all of their, proprietary, business information out there in advance, which I'm kind of suggesting might be dead wrong. They might not do all of that, but they definitely are, hyper transparent. And since so many of their improvements in the GitLab product, I mean, they bragged about having 4,000 commits one year from the open source community, and that's awesome. I love that. I love that it's an open source product, but it's also really terrifying because it completely and totally depends on the contributions of the open source world, who may or may not be being paid for those contributions, and are certainly not answering to any larger authority. So this is one of those cases where, the fact that Microsoft has been a successful business for a long time and doesn't mind being aggressive when necessary, that's where the good guy gets eaten for lunch. And I kind of feel like Microsoft and GitHub are eating GitLab for lunch right now. And I'm going to tell you why even more on that. So Microsoft has I already made this point. They're going to be around forever. They've already been around forever. We've talked about companies coming and going. That's a thing. But Microsoft is one of those companies that's been through a lot, and it still has a large percentage of the market. I don't see them ever going anywhere. Plus, they've got multiple streams of income. Not just they've made mistakes obviously, but they've got multiple streams of income, even more than Apple at this point. Apple has no cloud offering. So Microsoft ain't going anywhere. And if you are making a decision as a CTO or as a developer who's making, a package that wants to look like it's safe and wants to be adopted, that's very attractive to me. That means I want to, when people do import whatever and go, I want them to import GitHub. I don't want them to import, GitLab. I have them importing GitLab right now, and that's why I'm going through this, because I'm about to revamp all my projects again. And that's really frustrating, but this is just the facts. So as I mentioned, Microsoft doesn't depend on open source contributions from developers. It depends on, but it benefits them from, that's what's really crazy. Microsoft has managed to get everybody to participate in VS Code and other things like that by playing the open source game without fully, they're kind of pulling an Apple there a little bit, right? It's almost like Microsoft's learned a little bit from Apple, and they're like, okay, how can we parlay this open source software into something that saves us from wasting money and energy on that, where we could put it elsewhere? And, which would, I don't know, an underlying Linux operating system and kernel might, free up resources to work on other things like the cloud where the money is or whatever else, right? So they don't have that, and GitLab seems rather dependent on the open source contributions. I'm gonna before we go on, I might repeat this down below, but the fundamental takeaway is from this is that I don't see anything new coming from GitLab in all of 2020. Yet I'm going to itemize all of the new things that came out on GitHub. Now, one of two things is the cause of that. One, could be that GitLab just has horrible marketing and I haven't been reading it. I follow everything from GitLab, so I would be really surprised if that's the case. And two, the possibility is that they're actually not doing anything, that they've been mired in other stuff. I remember going to the GitLab conference and going, there's nothing here that I care about unless I'm a business trying to do integrated DevOps with my own container hosting. And so this gets to the other, this gets to this next point, which I believe not only it separates the offering, but it also separates the target market. And then I have to ask myself, and you should ask yourself, well, which market am I? You know, so GitHub focuses entirely on code management, almost entirely. They have been all about Git from the beginning. They made a big deal. They put Git in the name, which is a huge, huge gamble. I mean, if you think about it, because there's lots of other offerings at the time in 2008 when it came out. So for it to double, triple down on Git as having legs and longevity was a big deal. Now it was a good bet because Torvalds made it and everything, but putting that in your name, that was a big deal. And they've since then they've never really left that. In fact, their primary focus is on helping developers and teams manage code. That is the number one thing. Manage bugs in code, manage the code, document the code. Those are their primary. And then, of course, that left them adding on CI/CD stuff as it came about, which was, you could argue that it didn't get real legs until 2010, 2012 or so. And even now, a lot of people don't have CI/CD processes in place. So they are kind of, sneaking into that space. But, by 2014, 2015, GitLab's like, when it came on the scene, it was like, oh, we are not just code management. In fact, we do code management, but we are complete DevOps. And they've really pushed complete DevOps to this point. They still do, right? And they have a lot of things that GitHub doesn't have, such as, all this fully integrated CI/CD platform, for better or worse. And I want to talk about the worst too, where you come in and you just say, all right, DevOps, you are our thing, and we're going to take containers. It's going to be part of our system. We're automatically going to include hosting, and they're really, really all about the DevOps tool chain, even more than the code hosting, and so the code management. So there's a number of things that we need to kind of conclude here that are just physics. One is, if you are primarily focused on 10 components of the DevOps toolchain, you will never be as good as focusing on the one primary component of source code management. And so since I believe the reason that GitLab is falling behind, like really falling behind, is because they are so focused on this complete DevOps, that's straight from their site, that they lose focus. And so they're unable to put energy into other things that are related to developers and code management, such as, I don't know, an actual GraphQL API that's completed and finished, a command line tool that all developers can use to integrate into the thing, an integration layer and API that allows them to tie into any other service, including DigitalOcean, the cloud hosting platform for developers. You see my point? So there was a lot of energy expended, but it's not being expended to improve the core offering of code management that developers really want and love, right? To GitLab, I get the sense that, adding, I don't know, like README profile is, extra stuff. Oh, we don't need that, because they're focused on the business. They're focused on complete DevOps. And it really seems like their target customer is business hosting. And that is really played out this last year. In fact, this last year, I get the really intense feeling that GitHub has proven overwhelmingly that they are here for developers and for those who need help managing their code. And yes, you can do CI/CD and all that stuff, but that is their primary focus. Developers, we're here for you. GitLab is like, hey, developers, yeah, we're here for you, but can you get your boss on the line? We're here for your boss. We're here for your DevOps toolchain. We're here for your company. And so I get the feeling, having been a real big GitLab fan for years, that they may have started with a focus on developers to get us over during the whole Microsoft turmoil and everything, when they really had a moment to really wean over the developers and they knew they had to win us. But the sense I'm getting from GitLab lately is that they could care less about developers. They haven't touched their GraphQL API in a full year. I know, because I've been trying to use it. I actually thought about maybe contributing to some work to it. Meanwhile, GitHub has one of the greatest integration APIs of anything ever made. They were, I believe they were the first like big company to adopt GraphQL. And so I'm gonna break these down a little bit more, and we'll talk about these things. But I really want to touch on that point that this whole thing seems to be that GitHub is proving it's committed to developers because Microsoft bought it. Developers. We're going to give you a really snazzy dark mode. Our developers have. I'm getting ahead of myself. I break all these things down, so we'll return to that. So, okay, the GitHub doesn't have role permissions, but who cares? So there are a few things that GitLab had originally, which have turned out to, I believe, to be overcomplications that are unnecessary and unused that I once thought were benefits. And one of those is this ability to have multiple roles and permissions ability, so you can do this, you can do tickets, you can do this, and you can do that, and that. And meanwhile, people have been getting by with GitHub just fine because those kind of tasks don't really need permissions. They're taken care of at the meta level outside of the source management. So GitHub doesn't really need to get into the nitty gritty of, how granular of these roles and permissions are we going to have? Besides, almost everything is done with a pull request anyway. So the breakdown, it's like having an extra thing on your dashboard in your car that you don't really need. I've never officially used it. And I've, but I don't work with a huge team. And even if I did work with a big team, I just don't feel like that is a big enough compelling thing for a developer team to get away from the next facts, which are, and this one blew me away. I could not believe it when I looked at the statistic. So this is the beginning of 2019. No, wait, this is like the end of 2019. So I have the link here if you want to follow it. You can go look it up. Let me see if I can get it for you. So here it is. It's, well, you can see it. I told you where the link is. If you go here, here's where the stats are coming from. Last updated, Craig Smith updated July 1st, 2020. So as of July of this year, GitHub had 40 million users. Now, the last time I checked that statistic, which is on my old blog someplace, and I believe that was at the beginning of 2019. It might have been mid 2018. The number was 10 million users. So we're talking about adding 30 million users. And I could get this wrong. And if I do, and you got it in the chat, let everybody know, and I'll come back to it. But that is staggering. That is insanely staggering. That means that GitHub has gone far beyond just being sort of an edge thing, sort of being a core service, like a core platform as a service in the industry. And it already kind of was with the 10 million users, but that's a massive. And the same guy who tracks statistics was saying GitLab had 100,000 users at the end by about the same time in 2019, which I think was mid-year. And that's really sad because I remember the 80K number last time I looked. So it was 10 million versus 80K. And I mean, it's important to realize how much that difference that is. That is like, that's not even, what is it? Like I can't run the percentages in my head, but that is monstrous. And I can't even really believe that it's gotten that high, but it goes to say that it's just going to get worse. 100,000 users is nothing today. Nothing. That's nothing. That means there's practically, for all intents and purposes, almost nobody is using GitLab. And that we're tracking, right, and publicly. That means that if GitLab is going to fulfill all of its valuation, that there's something else going on that we're not visible to, and that would have to be in the enterprise. And I do believe that they do have a pretty big enterprise holding. I don't follow their earnings reports or anything, but that's my guess. My guess is that they're betting on the enterprise. Well, sorry, folks. As Vera and others have said in the chat. And Greg, GitHub has a really solid enterprise offering as well these days, and they didn't have that before. I mean, not to the degree that I'm sensing they have now. And somebody corrected me the other day, and I got confirmation of it that GitHub can be hosted on site. If you're an enterprise customer, you can host it. It's proprietary, but you can host internally on site for GitHub, and that's not anything I've set up. I imagine we have people in the chat who have. I believe Vera has. And so that means that if GitLab and GitHub are going head to head for enterprise work, and that GitLab is completely dependent on enterprise work, and Microsoft already has a huge foothold in the enterprise. I mean, let's be real here, right? How many companies out there, whether you like it or not, are Microsoft shops? Microsoft is the turnkey enterprise solution for lots and lots of companies. And now that GitHub is associated with them, GitLab doesn't have a chance in the enterprise. And that makes me super sad to say. It almost makes me want to like cry a little bit. That they're going to get gutted like a, I don't know what. They are, because Microsoft already has the inroads to the enterprise. It already has Azure. It's already providing a cloud offering. GitLab can say all it wants to about integrated DevOps toolchain and all that stuff, but a company that's going to go shopping, they do want integration. They want all those services provided, but when they can get cloud and all their desktop stuff for free, and get Microsoft Office 360, and get source code hosting all at the same time from the same provider, and get that package deal. If you're a CTO and you pick this one-off just to do GitLab and then throw out GitHub while the rest of your shop is Microsoft, you should be fired. Because I mean, if you're going Microsoft already, I understand why people do it. I don't particularly like it, but that's just kind of the reality for a lot of companies, and it doesn't make any sense to go with GitLab in your organization if you're already a Microsoft shop and you're already an Azure shop. Right now, the level of integration between GitHub and Azure with actions and hosting. So GitLab claims it has all these containers and everything, right? Which is great. It has this container hosting that doesn't come automatically with the source management. Well, after GitHub, it's only taken a few years, but now GitHub can spin up an Azure container and everything for you, Azure server. It's basically they're on their way with actions at the beginning of the year and everything, but that's just one little piece of it to super integrate their entire cloud offering, which is its own offering. That Sanjay used to be the CEO of that company when Microsoft acquired them. They know cloud. The Azure cloud is one of the most competitive on the market, if not the most competitive right now in terms of enterprise. Because why? Because and I don't use it. I don't like it. I hate it. But it doesn't matter what I think. What it matters is what the companies think. And the companies love Azure. And so they're going to go with Azure, and they're going to get their GitHub for free, and the integration is going to be automatic. And the tool chain, the CI/CD that's tied into Azure containers is just going to blow GitLab away. In fact, I'm really scared for GitLab at this point because I don't see them providing any additional value at all. And it's a great product. I mean, I really like. I mean, I want it to be more successful than it is, but it just doesn't have the chops to fight in this arena right now, and it doesn't have the momentum. Anyway, GitHub. So I'm going to keep going down with this, and I know I said this is going to be a long video. So GitHub responds to developer cultural values. This is a hugely controversial point this year, and how dumb I think it was for them to change master domain. It had nothing to do with anything regarding slavery. It doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is that GitHub is not only aware of developers, but it's aware of developer culture. And GitLab has proven over and over again that it's kind of lost touch with developer culture. And even though it has so many open source contributions and stuff, you don't see statements like this. In fact, there was kind of I think it was way overblown, and I was kind of on GitLab's side in this particular thing. But GitLab refused to do something regarding some code of conduct, and I don't remember all the details, but it was a scandal. And they're like, "What?" GitLab was like, "Well, what do you mean? You're not going to make a stance on this?" And you know what I feel about that. Not everything has to be politicized, but the developer community kind of responded against it, and the point I'm trying to make is that whether or not GitLab was right or not, the way that was handled in a way that kind of expressed a misunderstanding of the development cultural values of the industry. And I might not agree with those values, but it doesn't matter because the disconnect just made developers just turn them off. And then developers were like, okay, we're going to go with GitHub. and mentally they made the commitment. It's got a cuter icon. And we're going to keep going on with this. So they got something as simple as a skin color selection. So I was just going through GitHub the other day, and it said, which of these emojis would you like to have represent your skin when you thumbs up something? And you got to pick your color. It's a small thing, and you might not think it's important, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's those kind of subtle little details that don't take very much effort that demonstrate a connection to the developer culture that GitLab doesn't have, at least not to the same level. And that I know that sounds really harsh to say, because they do care about developers. I'm not saying they don't. The level of political involvement that GitHub has expressed, I don't particularly like when companies get super political, but the developer community in general is, especially lately, has been more prone to want to see some political involvement and some social change. And so, GitHub has responded to DCMA, I spelled that wrong, takedowns, and to, the whole ICE issue where they shut down, the ICE thing. Those are the kind of things that when developers see them, when a developer decides he doesn't want to participate, he's gonna become an activist and act out. GitLab's like, well, we got business to do, and GitHub's like, yay, we're gonna help you, and they jump behind the developer for the social issue, which is important, and it's really not important how I feel about every one of these social issues. The point I'm making is that GitHub connects better with what the cultural feeling and tone of the developers is right now. This is why they call it, the social media for developers, the Facebook for developers, and that's why, in many ways they have a lot in common with Facebook in the good parts, not so much the bad parts, in terms of the social media integration and promoting a community. And really that's what I'm getting at, is that GitHub is a community first and sort of a platform second, and GitLab has that a little bit, but not really. It really doesn't. I mean, GitLab is still kind of sterile, and it does have pockets of really amazing community. The GNOME project, for example, and there's great people over there, mostly because it's so open source, and they just will not. A lot of those organizations, the people on those organizations are old enough to remember the old Microsoft. They're like, hell no, we're not doing anything with GitHub. I'm assuming that that's how the conversation went down, but I don't know. So they went with the open solution there, which was that. And let's talk about that now. So GitHub promotes open source more than GitLab. Now, this is a statement that in the beginning of the year, if I had heard myself say it, I wouldn't have believed it. And I gotta justify this comment. And this was a very eye-opening thing. So I've been doing my own, organizing my own repos and things, and looking at sponsorships, and because my pagan project and stuff, I got some pretty good projects out there that I think if I could find some time for them, literally, I would like to do them. And I always am motivated by a little bit of sponsorship, like anybody else. I've set up, if you go to rwxrob.live/support, there's like a whole bunch of extra ways to support me as an open source developer and as a streamer. And I've been, this sharing economy depends on, the sponsorship of others and the donations and the goodwill of others towards promoting it. And that is saying more about supporting open source than whether or not your core product is given away for free. And that was a tough one for me to kind of come to terms with. I mean, think about it for a second, right? So which company is promoting open source more? The one that facilitates sponsorship and for literally 40 million developers to receive compensation for their open source projects and give away free private repos to open source organizations by request. You have to request it. And to contribute a better API for integrations to other open source projects, as well as contribute certain libraries and give back to the community, to participate in the markdown, the common mark conversation at the table with the people deciding it, participating in these open source projects while still not giving away the farm with their core product so that anybody can just run it in their enterprise. or the company that doesn't do any of those things, maybe wants to help promote open source and everything, but doesn't really take any further steps to facilitate that for those developers, and kind of focuses on their business enterprise, DevOps engineering more than that, because they're going to sell that. That's their product. Let's be real. That's their product, right? So, and doesn't really go that extra mile to facilitate open source developers making money from their efforts as through donations, but yet having their core product be open source, and then kind of honestly benefiting from the contributions of all those people. And I gotta tell you, after you're like doing the math here, I legitimately feel today that GitHub does more to promote open source than GitLab does. And that I did not have that position last week. It took a lot of reflection, a lot of real thinking about this, and a lot of like looking at the money trails and adding up the numbers, and for myself and others, and going, wow, like Sydney Storehouse, him, he's made Chalk and a number of really popular front end developer things. Completely and totally supports his entire career off open source contributions. TJ Hollowaychuk regularly has entire additions to major libraries. Including like the logger that introduced me to Pagan. These are things that are fully funded through sponsorships on GitHub and through sponsorships that are being mediated through GitHub. None of that is available for GitLab, not nearly in the same level that it's available to do, and with the same ease and with the same visibility that you see in GitHub. So my conclusion is, I think GitHub is actually doing more for open source right now, and I largely believe that's because they can. See, GitHub can think about things like, how can we add a sponsorship button on here? Because they don't have to do all the work, the extra work that GitLab has to do to try to get to hit their earnings reports and stuff like that. They can actually think about some of these other things that might be, GitHub can think about things that might be secondary to GitLab because they have other priorities right now. And so things like, a really kick-ass dark mode, or, things like that are, a thing. They have sponsorships, you have donation listings. In fact, when I was doing donations the other day, I'm getting ready to do it some more. I'm going to put these on some of my core repos. I was like, this is really easy, and it allows you to have any number of donation platforms and sponsorships. And I was just like, they have really given this a lot of thought. I mean, they have really, really thought about how to integrate all of the possible sponsorship platforms and crowdfunding. And I'm like, they ain't nothing like this on GitLab. I mean, that is a huge thing. So once again, where's the focus? Selling to an enterprise or providing for the needs of a developer, an individual developer, and that developer's small team. So I think, again, it's more evidence that GitHub is focused on developers, on me, on you. And I've slammed GitHub for some of the stuff they've done in the past, but today I have to admit that they're doing a lot of things right. Contributions from the company. So the company GitHub itself has contributed lots of things to open source, and Microsoft, like them or hate them, contributed VS Code, the most popular editor on the planet right now. And it has telemetry and all this stuff. It doesn't matter. They gave it away for free, and they're still supporting it. I don't see anything like that coming from GitLab. Nothing. So, that's just one example. There's lots of other libraries GitHub has provided that they've released. And GitLab has done some, but they don't seem to be as important to me. Maybe it's just because I don't know about them. Maybe you guys know about some. So free private repos for open source organizations. This is one that people tend to focus on this. I read a really great answer to a question somebody asked about this thing, like, why do you use it when it's not free? And the guy answered and said, he says, $10 is, what do you say? $10 a month is like a coffee a month. He's like, if you or your company, because it's only for corporations, right? If your organization, it was kind of snarky, but the guy said, because, okay, let's talk about this. So GitLab, everything's free. All the free private repos, unlimited, all that. Except for they had to clamp down on container stuff because they'd start making money on it. GitHub has long been beat up over this because private repos, even for individual developers, were extra money. And I used to be a pro for that reason, because I wanted to have, a certain number. You could only have so many too, by the way, at one point. And now it's unlimited private repos for individuals, and you have to pay if you're an organization. So if you want to organize your open source project like I did with Pagan, and this, by the way, the side effect of this, by the way, is that you see a lot of serious package libraries that remain under an individual's account, and I find that very annoying, but because it's free. So one of the popular ones is that Cobra in Go, the Go library, right? It's still under Steve Francia's personal account. It hasn't ever been factored out in like Toml did. Tom, he made Toml, the Toml language. He also created, one of the creators of GitHub. At one point it was under his thing, and then he created a new organization and put that under there. Obviously, you got them all for free. But the important thing here is that if your organization is open source, and I have a lot of experience with this over the years with GitHub, you just write them a thing saying this, and they'll approve it within a day or two. It takes almost no time at all. So if you do have an open source project, you can write and have them approve your organization. And then you'll have unlimited private repos as an organization as well once that happens. If you don't do that, you don't need it. And then there's the whole question of whether you really even need a private repo. I mean, if you can do a work in progress repo and then have a master branch and be fine. You don't really need to have a private repo in any kind of, for most of the things that you would be doing on GitHub. If you're trying to if you're in stealth mode or something like that, then GitHub's probably not the place for you. And if it is, and then you likely have enough funding that $10 a month for your employees or whatever it is like a coffee a month. It's not that big a deal. And so people, particularly people who focus on free a lot, I think are overlooking the fact that, and this would include me, by the way, that paying that little extra money for private repos for your company is not that bad, and if you have an open source one, you can get it for free. So let's move on to another topic. So GitHub has superior social media integration. One of the things that appeals to me about GitLab is the use of icons, and I still really love that, right? I love that you can have these little avatar icons that represent your group and every level of the subgroup, and you can just create a file called logo.png in your repo, and it will grab it automatically and put it right where it needs to go. And that's really awesome. But it's also a lot less important and relevant than this really, really solid social media integration that GitHub has with cards. Now, I believe GitLab has the same, but GitHub's integration with cards, so you can fill out the stuff to make a card, and it will automatically do the right thing on Facebook or Discord or Twitter, and it will show you a very customized view of your project in any of these social media platforms. That kind of integration is far more important than these cute little animated GIFs you can have for your project icons like GitLab provides. And I got to tell you that is, that's a real good call on their part, because they put the priority in what matters. It doesn't matter how you look when people are browsing GitHub or GitLab. I mean, it does matter, but what matters more is how your project is being represented to the world through all these social media postings. And then you have things like gist integration. You don't have anything like that with GitLab, as far as I know. And I mean, there might be actually, but it's certainly not as popular. Medium posts, I'm not a fan of Medium at all anymore. But, and I think you should just use a repo instead of a gist 9 times out of 10. But gists are a thing, and they are frequently embedded in blogs and other places that people use. And so, little things like developer status, which, GitHub added in response to that GitLab already had that. Those are tiny little things where GitLab beat them, but it wasn't too hard for them to add it at GitHub once they needed it. The whole developer profile README page stuff, where you can have a really fleshed out README profile and basically use that as your website. That's a big deal. And that's a big deal because it caters to developers who want to use their GitHub as a profile. They don't want an intermediate website. And that's fine. You can have a website if you want, but as we go into the Good to Gig series later, I'm going to think that one of the very legitimate, possibilities in terms of a profile, professional profile, even more importantly than LinkedIn, is to just provide a link to your GitHub profile, modern GitHub profile, which lets you really deck the thing out. You can put what you're doing. You can put whether you're available for hire. You can put so many things that LinkedIn already provides. In fact, it almost makes LinkedIn feel like kind of a waste. Obviously, some people still need it, but the more important thing is to have all this amazing stuff in GitHub with this really great profile. And while you can have a profile in GitLab, it's not nearly as cool, nor is it going to get nearly the level of visibility that you're going to get on GitHub. And that number, that 40 million number that we saw, also plays into the whole social, GitHub as a social media platform comes in, because when I'm watching all of my other developers that I follow, what they're doing, and I see what they're doing, it's more interesting to me than watching Twitter or watching even LinkedIn. It's like, oh, did you see so-and-so committed something there, right? And you can see right away when people commit things. In fact, I would start to suggest that it's more important to have GitHub up on your screen following it all day than it is to have Twitter on your screen and follow that, or LinkedIn, particularly now with all the kangaroos and crap that are showing up on LinkedIn. Because there's not going to be a single thing that's going to show up on your GitHub repo, on your GitHub stream, that's not going to be really seriously dedicated to things that you're really interested in. Libraries, thought processes, some people's knowledge bases are up there. In fact, my notes are all up there now. So if somebody, I know this is crazy, but you don't need some extra knowledge net platform, which I'm still going to do. Because why? Because you can just follow so-and-so, and then when you see that they committed to their knowledge README, you can go like, oh, what do they do? As long as they put it out there, you can actually see kind of an RSS sort of feed of all the people. If everybody were posting to like a notes repo of some kind, you could kind of follow along. And if they didn't abuse the commit history like I do, they could, get a good sense of what's going down, and even use that as a pseudo RSS feed for developers. And that's really compelling. That actually makes me feel like I'm missing out, because the more I'm looking at a GitLab front end, the more I miss out on that sort of live activity. Not to mention the bar, the green stars and the rankings and the likes and all that other stuff that is all very social media-esque that happens there. And so, yeah, we talked about the API. I think this is probably... this part right here that I'm about to talk about is probably the single biggest reason that I will be. There's a lot of reasons. The biggest one is the focus on developers, but I suppose the biggest practical reason is the comprehensive command line tool that I played around with GH. If you've been watching me for any amount of time, you know that I played around with a tool called Gits, which I did in Go, and I had another really amazing one that I did in Shell using curl, and I've got my OAuth helper library now, so I can do all that kind of thing. And the more that you look through the source code for the GH tool in Go that was released this last year in 2020, the more impressed I am that they just really know everything. This isn't just like pull down a repo. This is like handle issues and tickets and everything. And it's just going to get better. And GitLab isn't anywhere near being able to provide this. They're nowhere near. It would take them a good solid year of dedicated effort to get even close to doing this. I know, because I've been trying to write it, and I've been trying to help them, and I know that how abysmal their GraphQL API is. The GitLab GraphQL API is crap, and it seems like they got scared by the React licensing, which I did too, and so they stopped development on it. It doesn't feel like it's ever picked up again. And nobody cares, because why? Their priority isn't on integration, it's on this DevOps shit. And I know that DevOps stuff is important, but the problem is that they're like, because they're so dedicated to that one thing, they're not thinking about, well, I want to make this really great integration API and command line API for the whole product. Not on their mind. But at GitHub, it's the top priority. And they've made it over and over again. I believe they were the first organization to adopt GraphQL because of their relationship with Facebook, for better or worse, and probably the cross-pollination between those companies happening in Silicon Valley. I don't know, but I am just guessing. And so you get this amazing Go CLI with this that's built on top of this amazing API. And this is also why you get integrations. You can't even integrate to the level that DigitalOcean and Replit have done with GitHub to GitLab, because the API is not anywhere near baked. Nobody's going to go deploy a full API integration with the current GitLab API, because it's not even baked. It's not even close to being finished. And I unless I'm really missing something there, I remember interacting with the GitHub API through the shell and going, oh my God, this is so easy. I mean, it was just really easy. It was just basic curl commands to do all this stuff. And then when I started to try to do the same thing on GitLab, I started hitting roadblocks and roadblocks. I think, okay, I'm going to do the GraphQL version. And there's no one, there isn't one. Oh, here's the O API. And then it's just like dead. The whole project hasn't moved anywhere in an entire year. And if I'm wrong, someone correct me. But as far as I know, there hasn't been a single API addition in a full year on for the GitLab API. And meanwhile, GitHub comes out with not only this fantastic, API that they already sort of had, but they have this fantastic command line integration. And so I have to make a choice. I used to think it was really cool that GitLab allowed you to to do a Git push and have it automatically, make a thing for you. And now I'm like, that I don't care. I don't care because, and GitHub, the GitHub people used to always tell me, well, you can just do that from the GH tool from the command line. You can just make a repo right away. So, and they're right. But I was always arguing, well, yeah, but you see how GitLab is doing this on the server side. You don't have to mess with that. And now I'm thinking that was the wrong way to do it. Doing all of that magic, on the server side in GitLab is the wrong architecture. The right architecture is to build a really kickin' API and then allow people to do those things from the command line in addition to the push, to the clone, to whatever, rather than adding on unexpected, things to a Git push. So my position on that has changed. On that specific thing has really changed. And I believe the right way to do this is to make an API. Is to make a solid API. It's a very modern way of approaching this, and to build a really solid command line tool. And the GH tool is solid. It is solid. It's just going to get better. And GitLab got nothing. They don't got anything. If I want to do my own things, I can take the comprehensive CLI tool. I can add my own things on it. I can fork it and do my own. It saved me gobs and gobs of time that I had dedicated to a Gits project that I thought I needed to do to integrate GitLab and GitHub so that their mirroring would work and all that stuff. When in fact, the entire time, I feel kind of stupid. All I needed to do was add a secondary origin. That was it. And I can commit at the same time to both repos, which I will continue to do. The difference is that my little note on all the stuff I commit that says canonical source located at blah will now say located at GitHub instead of GitLab. And I feel kind of sad actually, because I love GitLab. I've loved it for a long time. I love what it does. I love what it stands for. I love the way that they're approaching it, but they're just not keeping up. Not even close. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I could sense that they weren't keeping up, and I was kind of still okay with it. And then, but by the end of 2020, no, I can't in good faith keep using it or recommending it at this point. GitHub has a far better marketing promotion. I mean, I don't think I need to tell anybody this. The whole cutesy OctoKitty thing, which really turns off enterprise people, is targeted at developers. Developers. It's not targeted at, you can even tell in the logo. So like the Fox logo in GitLab, it's targeted at enterprise people. It's looking very professional. It's very sharp. But the marketing and promotion and the free swag and everything that goes on at GitHub is it's not enterprise-y, but yet they've proven that they can be enterprise-y when they need to be. And they have better swag and all kinds of packages that come from that. And this leads into education, which we'll talk about. But the whole promotional material, the posters with the OctoKitty, the marketing team at GitHub is just blowing the doors off of GitLab. I mean, they're just destroying them, and they're catering to what developers want. And again, that's why there's 40 million developers at GitHub, and there's only 100,000 at GitLab. That means that they added some 30 million users in the same time it took GitLab to add 20,000 users. Think about that number for a second. In the same time, if those numbers are accurate, and I need to check them again, but these as they're reported to me, that means that in the same time that GitLab added 20,000 users, GitHub added 30 million users. So, and I imagine a lot of them came along for the ride once they knew that Microsoft was a thing. In fact, I bet a lot of them didn't even know GitHub existed until Microsoft. So, marketing is just going to keep going that way. And that's bad. That's really bad news for GitLab. GitHub has a much better foothold in education. I'm very proud to say I believe I was community member number 60 for GitHub Education. My post in the educators forum on GitHub Education site is still #1 for introductions. I've been following that for a very long time. I was really excited when it came out. One of my most favorite and popular blogs was making a code book with GitHub. And I had regular exchanges with the director of education over there. In fact, I've seriously thought about working in education at GitHub. And frankly, I'm reconsidering that as of this moment. As of this moment, I'm seriously reconsidering if GitHub Education would be interested in what I could provide them in some way. I haven't applied yet or anything, but they've been regularly integrating their educational offerings. They've got, I haven't read the forum in a long time. I used to be like active in the forum daily to help people get off the ground and help colleges and educators, employ GitLab to do like live testing and stuff. I believe Replit integration is really taken over in that space, and I think that's really going to be the future of that. I've told you what I feel about Replit in terms of not having internet access in your organization and how it fails in that front. But if you're working for a college or someplace where the expectation is that you have good internet, the Replit GitHub integration and along with all of the stuff that allows for live testing, live commit evaluations. They have basically a CI/CD that checks whether your assignment passes, and there's an entire like sub-department, division, whatever you want to call it, within GitHub dedicated to that whole thing. I'm unaware of any similar effort happening at GitLab at all. Once again, developers and developer education. I forgot to mention it here, but GitHub has created a university program for training coders as a part of their program. There's nothing like that at GitLab. GitHub has created a university, GitHub University, to help train the future of programmers. They're really, really actively dedicated to education, and they are proving it every day. And there's just no other way to put it. GitLab doesn't even come close to touching their commitment to education. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, because they're educating people, and those people, just like Mac used to do, they get them in early. They're coming into GitHub. They're getting the educational promotions. You know this, right? GitHub has an entire thing where you get this promotional pack. You get all this free swag and stuff just for signing up for GitHub. It's an entire package for promoting education, and it's got students just flocking onto GitHub. And my kids and guys and girls and everybody who's here love it. It's like they would get it when I asked GitHub some years ago, and I said, hey, can I send a thing? They sent me like a massive box with posters and stickers and little like helper things for Git to learn Git. And I was like, this is a company that's promoting adoption of their product and education as a part of it. And there's nothing like that for GitLab. There's just not. So that's another point. GitHub doesn't need mirroring. Okay, so this is something else that really caught me off guard. So I told you I feel kind of stupid that I didn't know you could add a secondary Git origin. I'm still relatively new at the more advanced Git things, and I consider having 2 origins probably an advanced topic. However, given the ease with which I was able to add a secondary origin and just do git push and have it go to both places at the same time, I realized how stupid adding mirroring to GitLab was in the first place. And I feel kind of foolish for listing GitLab's mirroring as an advantage. I mean, GitLab's mirroring in the past. GitLab has a really great export capability, including all of its things, its tickets and everything, and has really great import capability. And it has this really awesome way to integrate through tokens, this live mirroring push and pull to GitHub or to any other Git repo. But the more I've learned about how Git works, the more I've realized that that's a complete waste of energy. Because if you're doing it right, just use Git, and then everything else gets a brand new fresh copy, and you don't have to mess with all of that. The only time you would ever benefit from the import and export capability from GitLab is if for some reason you wanted to run your own instance of GitLab and all of a sudden wanted to go to the cloud or vice versa. But if you're doing that, you're probably not going to go with GitLab anyway, because it's just not easy to run by itself. And it's not nearly as efficient as Git and a bunch of other things, particularly if you're a small school and you're just trying to run it. You don't need a Postgres database and all that stuff that comes with it. So I I feel like what I used to think was a plus is now a big drag on the whole project because now they have to support it. Anytime they add a feature that's not particularly useful, they have to support it forever. And so they don't need it. GitHub doesn't need mirroring at all. And the other thing too is competitively, it's actually hard to get your stuff out of GitHub other than to take a repo and save it off. And I don't know if they intended this or not, but that means that once you start issue tracking and wikis and stuff like that inside of GitHub, it's also a reason not to do those things if you can get away with, issue tracking is probably fine, but you should probably not put your documentation behind a GitHub proprietary wiki because then you can't get it out. You should probably just keep it in README files like we've talked about and using a knowledge-based repo because that'll prevent you from having that problem at all. But the indirect result is it's actually harder to get your stuff out of GitHub and put it into GitLab. Now GitLab has got migration and all this stuff because it needs to, because it couldn't survive without doing it because so much stuff is in GitHub already. Nobody in their right mind right now would only publish to GitLab. There's a few people, known project and places that can deal with it, that can do that because they don't really care about popularity or getting discovered or any of that stuff. But the thing that's annoying about that, and this is also annoying about my repos, if somebody finds a bug on my repo, they have to have a GitLab account. Well, if 40 million developers already have a GitHub account, and I happen to be one of the 100,000 only GitLab users who forces anybody to add an issue or a ticket by going onto GitLab and opening a ticket, am I doing the right thing for the most developers? No. I should be putting my primary repos on GitHub because the issues and tracking and everything are going to be more accommodating and more easy for the developers who are participating in my project, and therefore I am showing that I respect their time and I value what they're doing. So unless you are sure that your team is only going to be on GitLab, it's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of a mean thing to not have a GitHub version for issue tracking. And it's hard enough to get people to do anything for issue tracking in the first place. Why would you make them have to sign up for an account on GitLab? They're just going to say, no, I'm done. I'm not going to add any bug report on this. They might, but the likelihood, they've already got an account over there and they just happen to be there. The chances of them dropping a little issue is probably more likely on GitHub. I think it's definitely more likely on GitHub. So another reason for that. GitHub project documentation support is superior. This is another thing I've changed my position on. So, GitHub and GitLab now have equivalent editors in terms of like editing the file and everything. GitLab has a rather involved web IDE in addition to a basic text editor. And the web IDE at first seems like a good idea, but after you get using it for a while and you get struggling with its default branching and stuff, you realize, no, I just need, if I'm going to edit something through the Git interface, which, you probably should never do, or through the the web interface, you probably just want to tweak a word or here. You're not really going to be doing a full blown preview and everything. And this starts to fall into the category of unnecessary addition that has to be supported. And so I'm going to say that GitHub supports just enough online editing. The real big thing that GitHub added 2 years ago, which really just made me happy, is the ability to drag pictures into the box and have those pictures uploaded into the GitHub repos, which if you're teaching people that don't know Git and you're just teaching them how to edit and stuff and using it more as like a Dropbox thing, which I know is bad, but it's better, particularly young people. That meant they could drag in their resources and they could upload them rather easily. And all of that's just gotten better since then. So GitHub has enough, it has enough. It's GitHub has been an active participant in the Common Mark initiative, even though they still support GitHub flavored Markdown, and they have followed through on that. And they do not have different Markdown engines and renderers depending on which part of the system you're using, which GitLab does have. I was really surprised to find that the README engine, that the Markdown engine on GitLab is some weird esoteric version of JavaScript Markdown. And I was like, I can't remember the one, but it was like not common. And then I understood, the rather public tweet last year in about the middle of the year saying we will now support common work. I'm like, okay, well, I thought you were all this time. And then I got looking into it and I was like, no, it's like in two different places, they even use a different engine. So then I was kind of put back. You know how I feel about Markdown. I was like, really, this is what we're dealing with here. And it wasn't Pandoc. It's another reason I love Pandoc. But so all that stuff has been taken care of on GitHub already. There was a moment when they had a different Markdown support in GitHub Pages from what was being displayed in the browser, when you go to a readme.md inside of some project, and that those two renderers, those two Markdown types were different, but that's been rectified now. And so everything on GitHub is the same GitHub flavored Markdown, which is, a superset of common work. And the people at GitHub were at the table, with JGM helping to come up with the common mark standard. And there was no participation from any member of GitLab at any of those conversations. So that effort has kind of, slowed down, but the fact that they were there all along shows that they're dedicated to coming up with common standards there. And of course, if you are a wiki person, the wiki support and the project tag support and all of those cool things on GitHub are currently way better than GitLab. I've never used the GitLab wiki ever. I'm pretty sure it has it, but I haven't really compared those two, so I don't feel as strong with that particular position because I don't use wikis. I use Markdown, and you should too. All right, so and this is one that I am really sad to have to admit too. So the GitHub UI remains superior to GitLab, and this is another one of these things that after using GitLab for a full year again, and going back to GitHub, I'm just so embarrassed to say that GitHub is just snappier. It's just snappier. It's more intuitive. The interface is faster. I don't know all the reasons. I don't want to believe it's because of the view dependency within GitLab for its front end. I happen to think it's more of a user experience issue, and they've just laid the components out wrong. In GitLab in general, you have to open lots of things. You know what I mean? You have to I have to open this thing to click on the thing underneath it. And that extra clicking and stuff is really annoying. In GitHub, the user experience is really solid and really in your face. And you might not see everything right on the same page, but when you know where it is, you know right where to go to get it. And it's a snappier, click and get your result a little bit faster. One of the worst things about GitLab that has really annoyed me, particularly with dealing with beginners, is the difference between the name for a repo and the slug, which is buried way down on the bottom of the page, hidden down under a submenu that has to be extended. So people will change the name and they don't know why the slug's not changing. And it's really super annoying. And even though those same settings are kind of buried in GitHub, you know what you're doing and you know right where they are, and it's you can get to them right away. It's so I just, I definitely believe that the UI in general is faster. So there's that, but it's more intuitive and minimal. As I said, the configurations are sometimes on GitLab are counterintuitive. GitHub has done a lot of improvement on their UI recently too. They put a lot more things under the profile under your name. They put a number of extra release information on the right sidebar. You can tell that they're really thinking about the user experience with the system. And I haven't seen a single user experience improvement in GitLab in a full year. I haven't seen a single thing change within a year. And I've seen lots of really great and amazing changes come from GitHub this year, not to mention the most recent, which was the whole dark mode they finally got going on. And so now, and this is the single biggest gripe I have with the UI on GitLab. And I used to kind of mumble this one under my breath because I absolutely hated admitting this while I was promoting GitLab. And I it's still my number one. I cannot browse a GitLab page with links because it has a JavaScript dependency. And you know how I feel about JavaScript dependencies, right? Now I let that go for a long time. I let that go for a long time because I was like, this is, technically this isn't documentation. Technically this is, this is a page and it's an application sort of, so I'll let that go. But I tell you what, when I browse browse sites on GitHub with links, I know exactly where to go. I know that it's 6 thumb taps to get to the actual content on any GitHub page. I can go there consistently every time. I know where everything is, even though it's an application. And I got to give GitHub kudos on this, because they have managed to create a rather involved application that also is totally usable from a links text browser. I don't know if they meant to do that or not. And the ironic thing is, even if that weren't the possibility, I would just use the CLI command line if I didn't want to go through the UI. But I continue to have really, really good success using a text-based non-JavaScript browser, and specifically links on GitLab. And to me, that means it's going to be more readable. In fact, I don't even want to try it, because I think I would just be my cognitive dissonance would just blow up in my face. But I have a feeling that if I were to use one of the blind accessibility assistant tools on GitLab, that it would fail miserably. And I don't have any proof of that yet, so don't take my word for that, but because I almost don't want to know that. But I have a feeling that you wouldn't be able to use it. And I actually also have a feeling that you would be able to get by on GitLab with minimal assistance technology, only because of how they behave when I use links on both of them. And in the past, when links doesn't work on something, it's usually the exception that it works with some extra assistant UI that's had some really crazy JavaScript actually populate all the attributes so that a blind person can still see it, even with JavaScript assistance. Almost always, if it doesn't show up in links, it means that they just don't care about that. and I really, really don't want to know that GitLab has decided to make itself inaccessible to the blind and to those who are challenged. Something else to note is that this is a small thing. I should probably make a point here. I have a stepson who's colorblind, and so I care about these things a lot. And I mean, the contrast in night mode on GitHub is amazing. So if you are using the user interface and you have any kind of color issues or contrast issues, you probably have other assistive, kind of like plugins and stuff like that. But by itself, it's already really good. And GitLab's isn't as good. In fact, GitLab's got, which is too bad, because I was really saying it had a good UI before, but the contrast is sometimes an issue on GitLab. I think we're about ready to go to the end here. Better night mode. The night mode that they just came out with night mode was one of the ones that triggered me to do all this. Night mode and the whole Git thing. The night mode they just came out with is just beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. Plus, it's really fun because you got the little animals that are all neon glowy and stuff. I mean, that's just really catering to developers, and they're making it fun for developers, not just efficient. They're making it fun, and frankly, I'm kind of an overly pedantic, serious guy, and after a while on watching comments and stuff on GitHub and seeing the icons and stuff, it kind of wears me down. It makes me a little bit less grumpy. So I like it. GitHub Pages, GitHub Pages, with the Jekyll, is still running on Jekyll, by the way. That's going to have to change eventually. It's still really slow. GitHub page generation is really, really slow still. They do have a CDN now. That was like 4 years ago. Before that, I wouldn't use it. But GitHub and GitLab both deployed a Netlify, which will actually produce a web page before Jekyll will return. It's the craziest thing. Go try it. Yeah, do a few tests and try to publish a page with GitHub Pages with Jekyll, and then publish exactly the same page, pushing it to Netlify, and the Netlify stuff will show up like good 30, 40 seconds faster than your deployments with Jekyll, because there's some sort of it must be some sort of detector that says if something changed, whereas Netlify, boom, as soon as you do it, it's kind of a webhook, I think, right into it. It just pulls it right up. It's really amazing. So there's that. I also like that the GitHub, well, we can talk about that URLs later. GitHub, I believe, now has a superior cloud offering, and this is another thing that I didn't want to admit. All right, so this the reason I don't want to admit this is because it's really sad to see GitLab losing this race. They could have done so well on this, and I just feel like they're losing it. They keep putting all their money into this DevOps thing. We got hosting and all this. And in the meantime, GitHub comes up with actions, which are far, far less complicated than all of this stuff you have to do on GitLab. But they don't provide the hosting, but it doesn't matter because it's all integrated into Azure Cloud now. And that just destroys GitLab. GitLab doesn't have a cloud hosting provider integrated. Now, there are some things that you have to do differently. Like there's still like Heroku integrations, and GitLab, to be fair, can integrate Jekyll and Azure and all those other things if you want to. But it's just, I haven't done a lot of work with this, so let me just put my hand in the air. I know others on my community have done so. Greg, who's been pushing heavily for us to cover GitHub in our new developer manual handbook for 2021, believes that these offerings for CI/CD are more mainstream. They're more likely to be encountered in the wild, and frankly, one of the things I really like about the non-authoritative kind of approach is that basically GitHub has said, we really don't have to be in this business. We can let other people be in this business. It's kind of like the Unix philosophy, right? Let's do one thing really well, and we'll add integration layers to those other things, and we'll let the other people do those things. It just so happens that the other people in this case are also under the same umbrella and the same organization, Azure Cloud. So Heroku's not, Microsoft might buy Heroku. That would be interesting. If Microsoft were to buy Heroku, if you're listening, Microsoft, because, I mean, if Microsoft bought Jenkins, Travis, and Heroku and brought those all in-house but managed them as separate projects, instead of trying to be all things to everyone like GitLab is doing, I just feel like, the thing about it is if you're a developer, you might not care about all that other stuff. And since they're focused on the developer first, these extra things are extras, which means they're maybe not as seamless and integrated as they are on GitLab, but they also don't need to be because you can add them as you need them. And I really like actions because they're just so generic. They can do anything, right? Including, calling a Lambda function or something like that, if that's what you want to do. You don't have to do that, right? I like the design of that better. I've never been really happy with how, I know that GitLab has a better container sort of offering. You can upload containers and stuff. But I've never really been comfortable making that happen easily. And so one of the things I will say right off the bat is that I don't use this stuff very much because I don't need it. So, the scale of the CI/CD that I use every day is smaller because I'm not working in an enterprise environment. But those who do work in the enterprise environment regularly, they are, at least the ones I've recently come in contact with, they're telling me that they're plenty happy with the GitHub stuff and that's the preferred way to do it. There was actually a consulting executive that I spoke with who had never even heard of GitLab. This was 2 years ago, and I let them know about it, and they put it into their presentation. They incorporated it as one of the offerings to look at in-house. But up to that point, they had been using all these other CI/CD sort of integrations just fine using GitHub. I still believe that the number of developers who are involved with GitHub means that they are more likely going to have experience using the GitHub approach to CI/CD, even if there is one or two points of inferiority compared to GitLab in terms of integration. So in other words, it's going to be more likely that developer teams are going to be familiar with the GitHub one. Does that mean that they should use it? Even if we haven't proved that yet, but let's say it's not as good, right? The chances are that number of 40 million developers is going to have, if I'm a CTO and I'm making a decision about an integration that I want to use, I'm going to want to pick the integration that is going to be most commonly available to the most developers. And as of today, because of the 40 million users using GitHub, the percentage chance of random developers in my company understanding GitHub CI/CD integration is going to be higher than the number of people who understand GitLab integration. So then you have a level of specialty if you're going to try to get a GitLab person. Now, the truth be told, the GitLab integration might be easier to understand. I don't know. But if I'm making a decision and I have to make the decision on that, unless I'm already a GitLab shop and have GitLab, faithful inside of my ranks, then I'm going to, if I have to hire people off the street, they're going to be more familiar with GitHub. I mean, the chances of that are like overwhelming, right? Because the comparison between 40 million users and 100,000 users is almost like saying nobody is using GitLab, literally. So unless I'm really missing something by internal deployments, I would be stupid to be a CTO who had a heavy developer group within my companies and say, we're going to bring in something that none of you have ever heard of before. I hate it. I hate that that's true, but yeah, why would you do that? I mean, you're just, I don't know. So I already talked about how GitHub makes exporting difficult to its advantage, which means that whether they planned it or not, they have a little bit better lock-in, even if you do go with it. GitHub did beat GitLab to the marketplace. So they recently announced the GitHub Marketplace in 2020. 2020 has been an amazing year for GitHub. I mean, I've been looking at all the things they came up with, little tiny things. A lot of them I listed here, and some are big things. And one of them is the marketplace. And they released things this year that, I mean, it was almost like they were just getting their speed up, the last couple of years. I was just super impressed with like VS Code integration a couple of years back and stuff like that. And now they've just in their API back that was like 6 years ago, and now they're just like taken off, and I feel like it's not even a contest anymore. GitHub, as I said, has a really solid enterprise offering. This is something that I've learned about on the live stream. There's a lot of people who work in sort of CTO capacity, whether they're officially a CTO or not, or they're doing, the enterprise work, and the percentage of people that comes to me who says that they are using GitHub in enterprise, this includes CEOs and others who are making big decisions about integrations, and they're making the case for GitHub, and they have solid facts about, one of the biggest ones was the DigitalOcean integration, which once again, developers, right? The company, the platform as a service provider. I mean, the hosting, the infrastructure as a service provider that prides itself on being the cloud for developers, is also, integrally linked with GitHub and its integration for pulling stuff together and everything, with no GitLab integration that I'm aware of today. So, the whole repo thing is another one. It's more likely for you to find a third-party app of some kind, and that's what the marketplace is all about. That's going to be integrated with GitHub than you're ever going to be integrated with GitLab, because the people making that product see the 40 million users and the 100,000 users, and like, there's more developers to use my product on this other thing than there are other things. So really, it's developers for the win, it's users for the win, and there's just no competition. Right now, in terms of total user count, GitHub is destroying GitLab, not just a little. So, and the pace and everything. So based on all of that, I will be maintaining my GitLab repos and keeping them there. And I will continue to post content to both places, but I will be moving all of my primary activity and primary repos, including all dependency links to GitHub. And that resolves even tiny little stupid things. Like, for example, if you have a Vim plugin, right? I want to start getting into more Vim plugins and writing them. I already have like a Pandoc plugin that I forked because I didn't want to play with the guys that didn't want my smart quotes. So I was like, I want them. And I have to, in order to do the plugin, I have to put https://GitLab, blah, 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 right? Well, if I have GitHub in there, I can drop all that. Just a tiny little example. I just have to put, user/whatever, and it just finds the plugin. But that in that tiny little microscopic little example is really the crux of the issue. The world defaults to GitHub, and if you're going to add GitLab, you're going to do extra work. And so you have to ask yourself, was the extra work I'm going to do for GitLab worth it? And right now, the only thing GitLab adds to the value proposition is an integrated continuous DevOps toolchain, which people may or may not want. And I tell you what, most developers don't care at all. They don't. So the developers will continue to use GitHub first. Some of you might be going, well, duh. And if you are, great. You've had a sense of prescience that is superior to mine. And that's great. I think that's fantastic. For somebody like me who really, 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 really wants to see GitLab succeed for all the reasons, primarily based on the people that are at GitLab, their direction, the things they're doing with their business, there's just so many reasons that I really love the company, not the least of which is the fact that they're entirely open source technology. They're promoting an open source product. But probably the most disheartening one for me to realize is that they truly deep down, I'm going to say something that's going to be very hard for me to admit. I think GitLab is taking advantage of the open source community where GitHub is promoting the open source community. GitLab is taking advantage of this product and depending on the 4,000 commits that they're so proud of every year for being a part of the open source community. And whether they intend to or not, they're taking those contributions and trying to parlay them into an enterprise offering. Meanwhile, GitHub is doing everything in its power to promote developers like you and me to get money for what we do as we contribute to open source, even though they have a closed proprietary Microsoft product. And that one hurts. That one really hurts because I at least wanted to believe GitLab was, I don't know if they're doing it purposefully or meanly or anything like that, but I feel like, I don't know, that's really hard. It's to a level of degree, it feels a little bit like losing my religion because I really love GitLab. I just love so much about what it was, but what I'm seeing happening in GitHub, and frankly, I'm still jaded from all the scandals and Silicon Valley greed and problems that went down in GitHub. You guys might not know about any of that, but I've been around long enough to see what GitHub went through, and it's almost like the company GitHub went through this like really hot time, and then it had this midlife crisis, almost died, and then it's had this new life and been resurrected by getting picked up by Microsoft, and now it's just going to town, right? And it sort of feels like GitLab is kind of all about the IPO and so proud of that, and focused on the enterprise now, and super happy they have these open source contributions because they promote the open source community, when in fact they're taking advantage of them and sort of behaving a little bit more like capitalists than even Microsoft in this case in terms of GitHub. So that's my conclusion. It's a very tough one to come to. You can roast me for it if you want to, but if you have any new information, I'm happy to hear what you have to say. Just don't let ever be said that I will not change my opinion, my deeply heartfelt opinions when I'm presented with new information. And it's impossible to ignore this new information at the end of 2020 with regard to GitLab and GitHub. I'm going to go ahead and open the chat up. I know you guys have probably been sitting here for an hour or so. If you've made it through this, great. If you haven't, great. I just really feel like I needed to just go down. You can go ahead and chop the video right here and go grab a beer, whatever you want to do. In fact, I'm going to take a little break, get a little drink, and I'll come back and I'll open up the chat. So that'll give you some time to compose your thoughts. I don't know how much chat has been happening right now. I don't know what you guys are talking about. So when I come back, if you have some really key points that you want to bring up that I missed, I would really appreciate that. You can participate in Periscope. You can participate on Twitch or YouTube, and send, or an IRC, just straight up on IRC, and go ahead and send those comments. If for some reason you're watching this after the fact and you aren't able to participate, comments should be enabled on all of my YouTube videos now. I'd really, really, really appreciate it if you could provide useful comments. I don't want to have like GitHub sucks or whatever, right? So provide a useful comment to the contrary so we can make these important decisions, and we can talk about that. All right, so give me 5 minutes or so. I'll be right back. right. An advertisement for GitHub, really? You don't know me very well. Look, I don't advertise, man. I don't. If I believe in something, I will evangelize for it. That's just how I work. Yeah, but I understand there's so many people who like stream and like get paid for their opinions to be in a certain way, particularly in the cybersecurity industry, that I understand why you might say that. I have no affiliation with GitHub. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with them over the years. So this is actually a really hard video for me to make. And I mean that sincerely because I really, really, truly believe in GitLab, and I have for a very, very long time, and their vision, and I've been promoting people to try to get jobs at GitLab, and I don't like making this video. There's nothing I enjoy about this video. In fact, I regretted making it the whole night. So this is not an advertisement. What about workspaces? Oh, you guys were talking about containers, right? Greg's got you there. So GitHub Actions are less costly. Yep. Buy a domain registrar too, so your website domains running their services would be cheap, right? The marketplace is pretty good from what I've seen. Whether or not you like that NPM is now being migrated over to GitHub, the fact that GitHub is set up to become a registry of sorts for different packages is a huge thing that, once again, is focused on developer needs, and nothing like that from GitLab at all. So Microsoft knows how to make good software next, switching to Windows. There's nothing. Look, I've already told everybody, I don't care what my operating system is, as long as I have access to solid bash command line and to tmux. I don't care. If it's Mac, fine. If it's, the problem with Mac is that I don't have all those other things, and then I have to give my money to Apple, which I don't believe in. If Windows switches to an all Linux underlying operating system like Mac is with BSD, you can be damn sure I'm going to switch to Windows, because then I can just run Linux and run everything else without a problem, and play all my games and everything on the same system with no dual boot. Who's not going to do that? You're gonna. I mean, Pop! OS is amazing. I mean, those people who still want to play around with their distro are going to do that. Yeah. GitHub has pins so you can fit in your GitHub user page. This is true. I forgot about that. Another one of these little things that they do for developers. Jewish, atheist, or Catholic. No relevance whatsoever. GitHub pages is a little confusing. It should be probably capital P on that, right? I'll fix that. No idea on the Reddit clone. Don't really care right now. Good morning, WWW. I thought you avoided GitHub. Well, I just did an hour-long video explaining why, so go back and watch the beginning of the video. And make sure you hit that web page, rdbx.gg /advice/use GitHub, and not GitLab. We used to have GitLab at work. We shut it down after this. Oh, God. This kind of BS doesn't fly in Canada. What? Is that King Fu? Is that I think that's the issue that was discussed. I'm going to go pull that up. Oh, can't find it. It's too long of a URL for me to work with right now. But I believe that's the issue. Yeah. Yeah, most people run computers. Video support, sure thing, sure, I'll watch it. I read your blog every time. Oh, boy. Been running my robs.io. Well, that's good. At least you know that when I'm lamenting about this decision. Again, if anybody from GitLab is seeing this or it gives me no pleasure making this video. And I have a feeling that GitLab's going to come across this video and go, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. And I actually hope that's true to some degree. I hope that I can get schooled on what is actually happening at GitLab. I don't feel like chasing down all your, your corporate business notes, your business meeting notes to get these answers, but I'm not seeing the level of commitment to the things that developers care about happening from GitLab right now. In 5 years, games will run in the cloud like Netflix. Yep. First thing I see at GitLab is that it paid and for enterprise, GitHub seems friendly and free. It depends on how you're talking about on that. YouTube download being removed from GitHub. That has the removal of YouTube deal being removed from GitHub was a legal issue. They added it back. GitLab, I don't believe GitLab has ever removed anything, mostly because there's nothing there. So, 400 million users, 100 million projects compared to 100,000 users with some fraction of that in projects. How much does Microsoft pay me? Microsoft doesn't pay me anything. Yeah. No, I wish they would. You know what? I'm not going to lie. Microsoft is one of the companies I would work for today. As much as I hate their draconian measures that they took in the matter of this last issue, if I were going to work for one of the big Silicon Valley-ish type companies, it's not a Silicon Valley company, but if I were to work for a company, the only big companies I would consider right now are Amazon and Microsoft. I mean, really big, like in the tech industry. And IBM. I would work for IBM again in a heartbeat. I drank the Kool-Aid. No, it's not Kool-Aid, man. They have core contributors to the kernel project. You see Apple doing that? Do you see Google doing it? Google does it a lot, actually. The best coffee. Maybe in Google. Yeah, that's the other thing. Google, Microsoft has some of the best Golang jobs of any company, of any big company. They're investing heavily in Golang and Rust. So, look, I know who I am, and I know how harsh I was on Microsoft for all their corporate practices for so long. But I'm telling you right now, the stuff that that Microsoft is doing right now, they still have a ways to go, but they should be rewarded for some of the things that they're doing right now. They are doing, there's a lot of really bad things they're doing, but it's not like, to make Golang better. I would work at the problem with working for Google is that the entire existence of the company is to sell you like a drone to people who are gonna grab your attention. And I just cannot get behind that. Microsoft, on the other hand, is selling real products to people all the time. Yes, they have powerful, buy-in monopolistic practices. Yes, all of that, right? The Windows kernel and Rust. Oh, wow. Yeah, they're rewriting the Windows kernel and Rust, like the whole thing, right? I'm telling you, man, if they actually manage to rewrite the entire kernel in Rust, first of all, that will solidify Rust's position in the industry. I have a feeling they're not going to be able to do it, to tell you the truth. I don't think they're going to make it. But if they do, they will have solidified Rust in a way that we've never known before. How's it going, Key Macro? I'm just saying that today's Microsoft is one of the most amazing places to be. From every indication I'm getting from the people who work there and the people who are contributing, and I'm not Apple. I'm not seeing the same thing. Google is still the same thing. People are still really compelled to work at Google and they really enjoy it. The problem is, you really have to sell your soul to work at Google. You really do. To work at Facebook and Google, you have to really sell your soul. You have to be okay promoting, putting your time and energy into something that is hell bent on destroying the world, literally. And I'm not doing that. Microsoft, if the Microsoft destroys the world, it's not going to be on purpose. It's going to be through competitive corporate practices. But they are making a product. And same with Amazon. Amazon, yes, they're selling privacy. They're trying to steal your ownership. They're not giving you, they don't give you ownership to your videos and everything. There's so many things wrong with it. But they're still selling a product. It's a centralized cloud provider. I don't like the idea of centralized cloud providers. I would really like to help people get off of this centralization thing, which is another reason I probably wouldn't work for Microsoft. There are so many other better companies besides Microsoft and Google and Amazon to work for out there. You just have to find them. And so I probably wouldn't work at one of those companies. But if you put a gun to my head and said, you must work for one of these top, 10 tech companies, they would be my first picks because they would be the least evil of them all. Yeah, WSL2 is getting GPU support, right? Uh, Better installer. I agree. They've been making strides on WSL2, but really amuses me. Extensible structure, right? Yeah, I absolutely hate Microsoft tools. I will say this. I liked Outlook. For a corporate tool, Outlook was pretty sharp, and I enjoyed using it. But there's so many things about Microsoft architecture and tooling that I just hate. I mean, they're just a product of really bad development, and but I wouldn't be going there for that, right? So one of the best Go programmers ever, one of the best container programmers ever. So Jess Frazzle, you guys know her. She's one of the ones who partnered with Brian Cantrill to make Oxide Computing. She was a big container presenter, and she was on the container team at Microsoft for years. So Microsoft's got a really big Linux team now. I mean, a real Linux team, not some pretend. This isn't a Microsoft advertisement, but you can't ignore that they have made these strides into these other areas, and that they are giving back to the community far more than Apple, for sure. Google, I would say they're probably on par with them. Google, Google is a really hard one, right? Because they are giving back amazing things to the industry. Kubernetes is not the best architecture. I thought Swarm was better. I still need to do more evaluation there of my own, but Google's brought a lot to the table and given back a lot to the community, but they're still being driven by selling a bunch of zombies to everybody. And the fact that is still their profit model, I almost wish Google Cloud Compute would become a competitor with Amazon, because then they could have a different business model that's not involved, mining all your data. But what are your thoughts on working for GitHub? I would work for GitHub tomorrow if I could. Yeah. If GitHub Education offered me a job, I would take it on the spot, because it's just so core with the stuff that look, I will say this. When I parted with GitHub some 2 years ago to start using GitLab, the biggest thing I regretted was dropping my association with the education team at GitHub. And of course I was just an independent, an entrepreneur building his own school and stuff. But that split really, why shouldn't I apply? I might apply. GitHub is the kind of company that's going to put me through one of those whiteboard interviews, which is why I won't do it. If they're going to put me through a whiteboard interview, I won't touch it. I don't care. I refuse to give my expertise to any company that's going to force me, to go through some stupid, completely irrelevant, ineffective vetting process. Yep. Measuring your ability to do data structures and algorithms has nothing to do with your ability to perform on the job, particularly for any of the jobs that I would be going for, even though I would be doing a lot of coding. So, yeah, Kubernetes deprecating Docker shim. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I don't know. Well, Containerd, from what I know, look, you're talking to the wrong guy. Tony Wall, you need to get him on here. But Containerd, I hear, which is what replaced Docker shim, right? So, because Docker is built on Containerd. So I think that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know. For whiteboard, you should be able to just have some recorded Twitch shows and watch a tablet while you play Xbox. That would be funny. I don't know, man. I just, I'll learn it all if I needed to, but if I don't need to, I won't do to. Solve this complex algorithm on the whiteboard. Job, move button 2 pixels to the left. Right. I just won't do it. I refuse to participate in that ecosystem at all. I'm old enough that I can say stuff like that. You know what I mean? A beginner friendly, yeah. Then that heavyweight Kubernetes, right? It is really, and that's why I like it. It is more beginner friendly. that's the people who prefer Docker Swarm that I've worked with. One of whom has a DevOps job now. That I helped. He's 18. He preferred Swarm. Truth is, I haven't gotten into either of those enough. I'm building out a Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster, kind of on the side, with a friend that I mentor. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're kind of building our own little learning activity. We're going to document it too. So if anybody else wants to go through their own little hardware learning activity with Kubernetes, using K3s and stuff, we could do that. Doesn't look like there's much more. I mean, I know it's late and everything for some of you, but it looks like there's not much more input on the whole GitHub versus GitLab thing. So K3 sup. I haven't heard of that one. What's that? What's that, Matt? That's a different one. I haven't heard of that one. So I'm going to put a mark in the stream here. Give me a sec here. So and GitHub. How about that? It's from Alex Ellis, a big educator and share. Ooh, really? Ooh, I'll have to go look at that person. I wonder if he's the one who did it. Did you see? There's like, they make racks for him now. You can get these, like, you can like stack them all up. I have 15 Mac Minis. I have 15 2015. It's actually 16 2015 Mac Minis, and I had those all. I had Rancher OS on them all, and I was getting started to do some of that stuff. They run a little hot. I mean, they're actually really cool running in general, but when I had them all in an IKEA hack cabinet over here, and I was like running a little hot. So thinking of GNU Parallel them. I know. I thought about GNU Parallel them. That would be super cool. That's funny. I actually interviewed for a parallel cluster job at IBM a long time ago in the healthcare. Yeah, it's a totally different realm, but it's so cool, man. It wasn't GNU Parallel though. It was a different one. They were using, I can't remember what they were using, but the Mac rack. Yeah. It's really funny too, because people look at it and they're like, wait, is that a bunch of Mac Minis? And they're like, yeah, they're all slaves to a Kubernetes cluster. And who knows? I don't know if I'm going to get any money out of them now that the new Mac Mini's out. You saw that thing, right? It just destroys the performance. You'd be surprised. Those Macs take Rancher pretty well. Yeah, they did. They ran it pretty well. Yep. And the crazy thing is you can still restore the Mac OS on them because it's got the firmware still there for downloading the whole OS again if you want to do a net boot, a network restore. You got to give Apple credit for that. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. Any Mac since for the last 20 years can be fully restored over the internet, and that's pretty cool. I mean that's you can do that with other things. Mainframe's back again in some sense. They really do. You can't see. Yep, it is. Use a Mac Mini in the lab, and that thing can take abuse. Yeah, it can. That's what I'm saying. They're absolutely silent. Absolutely silent. The most that comes on when I have those things on is the fan in the network thing. But my rack. Where's my rack? I should probably find it. My network rack has, I think, 8 ports of power over Ethernet. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I want to do for my Kubernetes cluster. Then I don't have to deal with the power cords. Yep. Yeah. I actually powered a Raspberry Pi off a television once. Yep. It was just barely enough. And it was funny because we tried to boot up the graphics on it and it crashed because it didn't have enough power. Yeah. Over USB. So I taped a Raspberry Pi on the back of an old TV, like with an HDMI connection. And I was like, man, I wonder if I can avoid the power plug to this. The POA hat for the Pi has a fan. Oh crap. Slightly disappointed in the noise. Really? In a multiply cluster? Yeah. Yeah, I think mine has one too, but anyway, so yeah, I put the I taped it to the back of the TV, and I fed it just off USB power, and it was almost enough power. It was enough power to run a console, but it wasn't enough power to run X. It's crazy because you think it. I mean, it was just a little bit too much power drain, and it would just black out on its own. Well, these were Pi 3s, but I have like 5 Pi 4s these days somewhere. They're hiding somewhere. I have so many Pis. I have Pis everywhere. I probably have 30 plus Pis just all around. They're in their cabinet. Just because we've been, just over the years, the way we would do it is we would buy a Pi for someone for class, and then they would use it, and then I would collect them, and then they would buy it again because you just don't know your Pi, you're going to lose parts and everything. We buy the camo kits, the Cana kits. Raspberry Pi 4s, yeah. Raspberry Pi 4 is the first Raspberry Pi out of the box that will run Minecraft server. I know that for a fact, and I spent a week on that. I tried it with the 3s. I did overclocking. I did extra fans on them. I did all sorts of stuff to try to get more power out of them, and they just will not do it. They just did not have enough to even do a minimal Minecraft server. That's kind of a nice benchmark though, because I tell you what, that RAM, yeah, but the 4's got a lot more RAM now. So we have 4 gig on day. Yeah, there's now 8 gig version, right? So the thing that's really great about the Pi 4 is because the like minimum viable application on there is a Minecraft server. It's a perfect server because especially when you're teaching a kid, it's like, okay, this Raspberry Pi can barely run Minecraft server. Well, for that kind of thing, for that kind of exercise, you want hardware that is really reaching to be able to perform. You want to feel like, the 1990s running a Solaris machine that's about to die at any time with, looking at your uptime all the time and nicing down your processes so you can control the runaway zombies and all that kind of thing. Dr. Bright, tell him to let me out. I don't know who that is. SCP. Yeah, or you could just have the kids run Kali, right? But the thing about running a Minecraft server is then they stick it in the corner of their house and they can run a Minecraft server and they port forward to the thing. Minecraft server on a headless Pi to introduce 4 channels. Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely perfect for that. You know why? Because it has to if they screw up, right? If they screw up, let's say for example that they accidentally run like 2 Java processes or something, it'll crash and burn. And that's what you want. You want the server to crash and burn when you're learning with a young person or like that, because you want them to realize they don't have unlimited, resources. If you don't, having the limitation on the resources is a good thing, is what I'm saying, because it teaches them to be a good system administrator. They have to look at their runaway processes. They have to look at how much RAM is being consumed. They have to understand what happens and when the fan comes on and when their processes go crazy. They have to, you know what I'm saying? They have to do all the things. Yeah, constraints are good. They really, in this particular case, it's just ideal, because then they'll go and they'll try to put an extra 10 plugins in there and all of a sudden it won't run. And they'll have to say, oh man, which plugins am I going to use? Oh, if that plugin had better management with RAM, it would be better. And so they learn all these great things that they wouldn't learn if they were just on some random desktop. I really love that. And by the way, that makes them better able to put stuff out in the cloud. DigitalOcean offers a 1 gig RAM, $5 a month box. Bar log, right? So they have to learn all those good things. And now they care, right? Because they want to know why I got hacked or who's trying to scan them and blah, blah, blah. And then if you go out to DigitalOcean, right? So DigitalOcean, you've got, it's $10 a month for 2 gig, and you can barely run a Minecraft server on that. So yeah. Uh, 5.1 volt power adapter for earlier than Pi 4. And Pi 4 now says 3A that most USB adapters don't have. Oh. Back in the day, we sent people to the moon with 4K RAM. I know. Yeah, 64 gigs is barely cutting it. Yeah. Electron, man. Electron. Yeah. I don't know what Hetzner is. Sorry. I'm behind on that. What is Hetzner? Hetzner Online is an internet hosting company, data center operator south. Oh, it's like a DigitalOcean. IaaS, infrastructure as a service kind of stuff. Interesting. Yep. Have you taken a look at ultralight? It's basically what Electron should have been. Have not. I'm taking note. I'm going to go look at that. Oh boy. Screw up. Ah. There we go. I have to really trim my notes. My notes are out of control because I'm at the end of a year, and I tried to decide whether I was going to put all my notes in a single file or I was going to break them up by month or anything. So it takes me a little bit longer to render. Most of the time it takes rendering is me trying to prepare an RSS file, which I'm going to abandon. I'm just done with RSS. RSS is such a horrible design. Can I just say it's such a bad design? It's just a horrible design. Counter-Strike on Windows XP. Now you kind of CSGO and 2 gig. Yeah, or try like Cyberpunk. So my stepson gave up with Cyberpunk finally. He went into a room with too many lights and his computer crashed. And he's got a beefy computer. And he's like, I can't play it. It's too crazy. I'm not kidding. It's exactly what happened. He's like, I can't do it. It's just not fun anymore. And he's got it on pretty low resolution, and he's got a pretty beefy computer, and he's like, I can't do it. It's like, I feel really bad for them because they really missed the boat with that game, man. I mean, I kind of had a sense that I wasn't going to be into the plot line, but all the rest of the stuff that's been going down. Yeah, RSS is actually one of these technologies that seemed like a good idea at the time. Kind of like XML and SOAP and Corba. The RSS is based on a really failed premise of communicating everything a person has to say as a stream of notifications, rather than the more successful and well-tested approach, which is represented in software development, which is a notification of the differences in a system from one state to another. RSS is fundamentally built on a stream of whatever. In most cases, it's implemented. It doesn't have to be, but in most cases, it's being implemented as a reproduction of what was already on the web page over here. If not, it's a summary of that, or it's a notification. It's like, hey, this person posted this thing, in which case you still have to go to the thing and go pull it down. There's all these different things you can do. One of the biggest practical problems with RSS is that you can't get anybody to follow the same standard. And that's where the Atom guy came along and said, no, this all sucks. It's like he wrote an article, The Myth of Compatibility, of RSS compatibility. This is what got Atom off the ground. And the idea behind RSS in terms of like sharing information and notifying people about things, that makes a lot of sense. But I think the reason that the core architecture of RSS is so flawed, right, infighting with the RSS community, right, and I was going to say that too. That was another thing I was going to quote you. So the RSS infighting and this entire bureaucratic crap that they had to go through to even have a conversation about what should be done ended up resulting in one of the worst possible designs you could ever have. What they should have had is they should have had a few people just make it and then get some groundswell and get the thing off the ground that way. And it would have benefited from a benevolent dictator instead of this horrible community-driven development, which killed it. It's killed it. That community infighting, all that stuff. Somebody finally said, "I'm going to do out of my way." The end. Sorry, my name was, but gosh, did he cause issues? Yeah. Well, there was a bunch of them. We're not talking about Aaron, right? Was it a different one? No, why I never heard about. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. I didn't follow a lot of his stuff. I lived through it too. And when it died, I was like, okay, I know why this died. The most annoying thing about RSS is let's take, so I believe the new frontier is being defined by what we've learned in terms of software design. This is the whole basis of KnowledgeNet, of MemWorks, KnowledgeNet, whatever you want to call it. And it's all based on diffing the state, diffing a state from one to the next and communicating those differences. Yeah. Oh, wow. You did really? Wow. I am in awe of you. I would love to meet him. I'm going to have a big old poster of him in my room here pretty soon. I'm ordering one. Aaron is kind of like my I'm like praying to Aaron, like, may I do the right thing in your honor. Oh yeah. The whole Internet's Own Boy is all about that. You probably really love that, Q, if you haven't watched it yet. Yeah. The Internet's Own Boy. I've talked about it before. It goes into the details of how he worked with Lessing on Creative Commons and all that stuff, helped form RSS. The RSS is built on this flawed premise of push notifications, or pseudo, not even real push notifications. It's like, let's detect how this file has changed since the last time I had this file, and I'm going to only send you the stuff that's changed. The problem with that is that when you drop stuff off the end, it's just got tons of problems because first of all, it's a finite system. You can't have a continuous level of like things rotating off. And if you do, you're going to lose stuff. So what happens when somebody comes to your system for the first time? What it really needs is something like git commit history. That's what it needs. And this is why I think whatever system replaces RSS, and I'm working really, really hard to make one, it will be based off this really well-established best practice of diffing the changes and communicating those changes and then letting you decide whether you want to see those changes or not. And in the case of knowledge, that means we've got an extra knowledge node or two that were added that weren't there before, right? And it's not linear. It's like, oh, I added an article about this. I added a different thing about this. I added a different thing about this. And so what you get is, here is a diff. Here are these knowledge nodes have all changed. And then it's up to you to decide which ones do you want to pull down. So at that point, the notification feed is really a good idea, the whole diffing thing. But the real problem is that RSS never really figured out what to do, what the diff was based on, because they weren't building it. We can share a great conversation and not agree on everything. It's just a place for that. I'm grateful. Yeah, you don't have to agree with me on this particular part, but and I, there's probably stuff about RSS that I should learn, but Git has, Git, this idea of Git diffing things is really where it's at. I really think that's where it's at because then you can just say, I have this many resources, and these resources have all changed since the last time, and that's it. You don't communicate anything else, and that is how that's how the whole Git system works. That's how software management is defined, and you can see an equivalent to an RSS replacement happening in GitHub and GitLab when you see the stream of notifications about what people are committing to. So they're being notified that work is happening and that activity is happening, and then you can click on that thing and zoom in and you get out what you want. So I envision a browser of some kind where you're only notified about the changes your subs have made to their content, and then you can measure the activity, you can measure how many of those things have changed, and you can click on one and you can pull down the whole thing rather than having it be contained in the XML, such as most newsreaders that I use. You had to decide whether you wanted to click on the whole page, because the newsreaders, I don't know if this is just a matter of factor from the newsreader, but you would get a newsreader and you would get basically the whole page, except for the pictures or this or that. Plus, you didn't see it in the original form, and it just stripped it all out. And I'm really about getting the text as a notification and all that stuff, but I don't. I think that honestly, I think that's probably one of the reasons that RSS kind of died out, because it was redundant. And then Twitter started being the way people were getting notified that somebody made a new blog post, and then they would click on the blog post and they would get the full experience with all of its color and style and everything. And the number of people who were gaining value just seeing all the things that changed during a given day. The ability to subscribe to lots of people, I still think that is the thing. And that's a real solid approach. The idea of being able to subscribe to people in RSS, I really believe in that. That's a really big, solid thing. But I also believe we should be able to blacklist people, and we should be able to share our subscription list with other people if we choose to. Google killing Reader, yeah. I remember that. And the rise of social media such as Twitter. Yep, I would agree completely. But I think the reason Google killed it is because it was kind of dying already because of Twitter. Yeah. Plus, people weren't participating in the RSS in this stuff because they didn't want people to think that a lot of the people that were producing content, and they still are this way, they're producing content because they want you to come to their site. One of the reasons I think Google killed it is they realized they weren't going to make any ad money on it. Think about that. Supporting RSS, Google supporting RSS was directly against their financial best interests. We're talking about a company that gives you a higher SEO rank by not linking out to other sites because it makes you more authoritative to have more inbound links. So like SEO 101. And we're talking about a company that rewards people who don't send people away. And what was RSS doing? It was preventing people from even going to web pages at all. How's Google going to make any money if they can't go AdSense you on the page that they're linked to? It was directly against their financial best interest to support it. That's why they killed it, as far as I'm concerned. Plus, they also saw Twitter coming up and they're like, oh crap, right? Twitter's getting all the ad revenue as the feed. And then they came up with like Google Groups, and they tried to come out with Google Social Media. Remember that? Yeah. Not too long after they killed RSS Reader, they tried to come up with their own Twitter. They didn't do very well. That whole thing crashed and burned. RSS Atom OData. Huh. Yeah. I haven't. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look at OData again. I don't remember it. Yeah. I don't think Google is ever going to be for Google's stock imperative is controlling attention. And as long as that's true, they are never going to promote the free exchange of information. They'll promote, the exchange and search of information in there as long as they control it. But something like RSS or any other solution like the stuff we're coming up with is completely against their best interests. And that's why that company has to change and go away, because as long as its money is coming from controlling attention, there's no way it'll ever change. I think we have a better shot of Microsoft helping us out in that regard than we do Google, because Microsoft wants to help you as a user. You're paying them in one way or another. So, although not for the operating system these days, it's more about the cloud services. It's based on Atom and the Atom Publishing Protocol. Large Cal, I'll have to look at that one. Yeah. The bottom line, I don't even think we need a new protocol. We just need a way of organizing the data in knowledge nodes and then allowing people to pull down the data. I think that's another thing I really, really hate about RSS is it's so over-engineered. It's like, it's exactly what you would expect from a bunch of smart people. It's just so over-engineered. I really don't like that. You just need a list of what changed, and then you need to point to those things and let people decide what to do. The end. Exactly. Why not use Git? See, that kind of question, my system essentially uses Git. It applies all the principles of Git to a knowledge base, and each person has their own knowledge base / site or whatever. And you essentially run Git against that person and see, well, what things changed since the last time. And you pull down all their changes, and then you can see what things change. You can decide if you want to cache their changes to your site, because everybody has a redundant copy of everybody else's knowledge base, so that you can search it locally. And that's part of my whole MemWorks project that I've been working on for years. So 7 years. The Essential Web, KnowledgeNet, README World. It's been called many things. RDF, really? Yeah. Yeah, nobody, well, that's grateful. That's what we're saying. There are still some people who really use RSS. The need for an RSS reader is still a thing, but RSS isn't the thing they really want. The thing that knowledge workers really want is to be able to, well, you're probably older, and so you've been around RSS for a while. A lot of people, the people who use RSS largely have been brought up with it. But the people who haven't been brought up with it use social media for that. Yeah. Yeah, and I did too for a long time. And then the first time I stopped using it was when I was like, this is a redundant copy of the exact same data on my site. And my Atom file and my RSS file on my site was as big as my entire site. I'm like, why am I doing this? This is a redundant copy. Why can't they just copy it? But you can't do that, because then they'd have a whole copy of your whole site. Right. Yeah, most people they want exactly, which is why the KnowledgeNet is all Markdown. Yeah, MemWorks KnowledgeNet is entirely based on Markdown. I'm gonna mark my words. We're gonna make a MemWorks KnowledgeNet browser that is 100%. It uses nothing but Markdown, and has no HTML in it at all. Channels like this. Well, I'm glad you found us. Yeah, I have to go to Q Macro. It's probably a good time for me to take a break. At 2007, RSS felt like kind of legacy and deprecated, right? So I didn't really want to use it. Yeah, and it is, and it's most people. You can accomplish the same things with RSS with Twitter and GitHub. Yeah, if you go to GitHub and you watch what everybody's doing. So this is what people are doing, by the way. Noob School. Yep, we're going to be doing Noob School Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Wait, what's the calendar look like? Oh wait, that's Friday night, 25th. I probably still will do it anyway, because I need to finish it. I need to get through the material so I can put it up on Vimeo so you guys can watch it. And I need to do some editing on all that material. Stuff like that. I applied to be partner. We'll see if I actually get it. Yeah, I need to take a break and figure out what I'm going to do. We do need I think we need something better than RSS. That's what I'm working on. But I got lots to do before I do it. It's got to have, the problem with RSS is it's entirely based on HTML. And we need something that's built on a universal knowledge syntax. And I believe that's Pandoc Markdown, which was at the core of the issue. That's why I created Pagan, to start parsing Pandoc more effectively, and also create other grammars and stuff. So yeah, I'm going to come back and do a little bit of coding after this. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Let me just take a break, and we'll decide what I can work on next. But I feel like we've been going for a long time here. I'm going to go ahead and cut this video, because I want to be able to just have people see it as the video for related to the GitHub and GitLab thing. And then when I come back, it'll be with a new title that's more relevant. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call it for tonight, at least for now, and I'll be back. I don't even know what I'll do when I come back. Probably a little bit more of the I don't know. We'll see. There's lots of things I still need to work on. I probably need to clean up the OAuth module. I might even just do a whatever stream so we can just randomly talk about whatever. All right. So, and then I'll talk to you guys a little bit. This is the video. This video right here that you just watched. So